Welcome to the Women Writing Podcast. I'm your book coach, Liisa Kovala. I'm an author accelerator, certified fiction and memoir book coach, and the author of Like Water for Weary Souls, Sisters Winter War, Surviving Struthoff, and the upcoming Hygge House Cozy Mystery Series. As a Finnish Canadian, I also love my coffee. Take a coffee break with us as we chat about all things writerly with authors and publishing industry professionals. And don't forget to sign up for my Women Writing newsletter on Substack and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great content. On today's episode of Women Writing, I'm having a coffee break with Dr. Nora Gold. Dr. Gold is the prize-winning author of 6 books, as well as the founder and editor-in-chief of the prestigious online literary journal Jewish Fiction, which has published 650 stories never before published in English that were originally written in 23 languages. Gold's first book, Marrow and Other Stories, won a Vine Canadian Jewish Book Award and was praised by Alice Munro. Her second book, the novel Fields of Exile, won the inaugural Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Best Novel and was acclaimed by Ruth, Wisse and Irwin, Cotler. Her novel, The Dead Man, received glowing reviews, including in the Los Angeles Review of Books, and won a Canada Council for the Arts translation grant. Her fourth book, 18, Jewish Stories Translated from 18 Languages, an anthology of translated works, was praised by Publishers Weekly, Cynthia Ozick, and Dara Horn, was a finalist for Foreword Indies Award, and was featured in the New York Times Wirecutter in both 2023 and 2024 as a recommended Chanukah gift. Gold's fifth book, In Sickness and in Health, Yom Kippur in a Gym, 2 novellas, received international acclaim and was one of the 5 books that Hadassah Magazine chose to feature in fall 2025. Her latest book, the novella Doubles, will be published on May 1st and has already received rave advanced reviews. Hi, Nora. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Lisa?
I'm so good. I have to tell you, here in Northern Ontario, we have been like blanketed in so much snow. I think we broke a record. I think it was close to 40 centimeters. And we have been hemmed in, like we got into our driveway, but the road has been closed. Like we couldn't get until today. So the road is now open and I feel like
great. Oh, this is so crazy. I mean, Toronto, we're covered in snow, not as much as up north. Yeah. But, you know, spring is 3 days away. I'm finding it really hard to relate to that, you know?
I actually had my deck. I was shoveling my deck maybe a week ago and I was wearing flip-flops, which of course you do as Canadians, shoveling snow. But the deck was almost completely clear. And now it's like several feet of snow. We're done. We don't want any more.
I'm so done with this weather. And every time you put your boots and coats away and you say, oh, what a lovely day, it's over. And then there's another, not even just snowfall, sometimes a terrible storm. So I don't know. We'll see.
It's been a winter, but we're, like you said earlier, spring is just a couple days away. And I saw a little clip on, I don't know, YouTube or something the other day. In 4 months, we'll all be, you know, hot and in the lake. Okay, I could do this.
That's true. That's true. I'm counting the days.
That's right. Yeah, we really just need to hold on to any hope we have right now. I just try to keep myself upbeat about even the snow because it is really pretty. Like if it was December, I'd be like, oh, it's so pretty. But for this time of year, not feeling as great about it. So I'm so excited you're able to come and chat with us today. We're having a coffee break together. Do you drink coffee or tea or water?
I'm a water drinker. This is my favorite drink, and I drink a lot of water. And yeah, it's a great thing. I know you're a coffee lover, right, Lisa?
I love coffee. I will drink coffee all day long, but I like water too. But I just like my water room temperature. Which is
me too. I don't drink cold.
Yeah. Okay, no, me neither. I'm like, I just want room temperature, but I'm trying to remember to have at least a glass of water between my cups of coffee because I will drink just coffee if I can. But I like water, and especially if I'm exercising or outside and it's hot or whatever, I will drink a lot of water. But I'm right now a little bit out of the habit, so I love that you're drinking water today. So you've been a writer for how long have you been a writer for? Your whole life, or did that come later?
I would really say my whole life. When I was a little girl, like 5 years old, and you know how grown-ups are always asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said a writer from the time I could talk. And
Amazing.
actually, we'd go on family holidays and I'd bring my doll and all that stuff. But I always had this little box which had paper and a pencil in it.
Yeah.
Even as like a 5-year-old, as soon as I learned to write, it's always with me. So yeah, it's not a new identity. I know there are people who, don't just begin writing as adults, but actually begin thinking of themselves as writers only when they hit 30 or 40 or whatever. And that's not the case with me.
It started early. What were you exposed to a lot of books as a child? Like what brought that on? Just people reading to
Well,
you or
you know, I do come from a family of readers, and my mother taught literature. I come from a family that's rather intellectual, but what I remember as the trigger for this was something, and of course, I date myself because we no longer have records. But when I was a child, we had records, and there were records for children, these small, very thick, because presumably so children couldn't break them, thick records in different colors. And I had my red record, my blue record, my yellow record, and they weren't music, they were stories. And I remember when my mother would go shopping or something and I'd be left with someone, I get them to put on the record and then the story would end, whatever it was, the little red caboose, I think I can, whatever it was. After it stopped, I'd continue the story. I
oh
would just keep telling the story. I'd make something up and I could go for a half an hour like that. So, and I come from a family also where people like to tell stories. My grandparents were from Europe and they would tell stories. So to me, it felt like a very natural thing to do. It wasn't, oh, you're making yourself, it's pretentious. Who do you think you are making up literature? It wasn't literature, it was stories. And I still think of them that way. I don't really, um, obviously, I guess I think obviously I'm writing literature, but when I'm writing, I don't think in those terms. Create something intellectual. I don't.
right.
I'm telling a story that I want to be understood by people. And I don't try to use language beyond what most people understand.
Yeah.
It's not like when I was an academic and you're expected to use a certain kind of language. I know how to do that, but that's not what I do when I'm writing because that's not the purpose of this writing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I remember those little records and they were all brightly colored
Yeah,
and I think they're about this size and
yeah.
like you said they're so thick and you could smash them, but they'd always play. I mean, they were a great source of entertainment and storytelling and then I loved there was I forget if it was those ones or those other small ones where the bell would ring so you turn the page with the story. Do you remember that? Like
Oh,
there was
I do.
narration and a ding, and then you turn the page so you could follow along.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so great. Yeah.
Amazing. I
Yeah.
don't remember, I remember those, but I mainly remember listening to them over and over when there wasn't an adult to read to me.
Yes.
Um, I think they filled that sort of function as well. Obviously, having someone read to you and cuddle you, and that's sort of the best of all possible worlds. But these story records, and I'm delighted that I'm talking to someone who remembers them because
Oh,
most
I
people, yeah,
remember.
most people are like, no, what's that? Um, no, they were really magical. They
They really
really
were.
gave you, yeah, they really gave you something very important when you were alone. Yeah.
And even just that idea of academic writing, like when I was teaching AP research to high school students, we read a lot of academic articles together. And some of them were quite well written, and others I thought, I was reading this because I mean, it just sounds so convoluted. And
I
there
know.
is a nicer, easier way to say this that will make it more, digestible, but for everybody. Like it didn't make the article sound better because the language they used was so
No,
terrible.
no,
But my students would like really start to pin down what they liked about certain, like even the style of writing in those articles because they were like, well, you can say the same thing in this way and it will,
Right.
it's just clearer. So,
Well, you're teaching them a very important lesson, and there are a lot of, I think, academics and also aspiring academics, doctoral students who think they're going to impress if they use language, especially since the advent of postmodernism. There are articles, I just can't read them. I mean, I know what the words mean,
yeah.
and it is so painful to read. Like, just, I won't bother. It's just not worth it to me. It's really sad what's happened to academic language, I think, but that's a whole other conversation.
100%. No, and then when you do read really well written academic articles, they're so informative and interesting, and you want to know more. And I think that would be the point of of the article, but whoever's behind it is not necessarily thinking like that, right? So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
just, it's fascinating.
yeah, no, I mean, I think you have the same issue with fiction or with any kind of writing. Who is your audience? Who are you writing for? And if you're writing to impress a professor and you're a student, that's one thing. If you're writing to be understood broadly, some of the most important academic or scientific writing these days, I'm thinking of one article in particular, something that interests me, is um, some of what can be learned about, from ancient DNA, which is not my field,
Right.
but the person who writes about it and who is actually a relative of mine, David Reich, his purpose is to let everyone in the world understand. And these are incredibly complex things, which are absolutely accessible to anybody who reads them. And I thought, like, why isn't it all like that? Like, what
Yes.
is the point? The point is for people to understand what
Yeah,
you're writing, right?
exactly. I agree. I'm reading a lot of work right now on sleep. So some of them are academic articles, and
Mm.
some of them are books by sleep experts, but those books are often read for sort of a more general audience. And
Yeah.
so they're more personal and they have this kind of,
Yeah.
different lighter tone, but they're taking quite complex ideas and being able to explain them in a really simple, accessible way, which I think is brilliant because if you can't boil down your idea to something that we can all understand and even enjoy, then I don't know what we're doing. The academic articles, there's a range of them. But what
I
I'm
think
curious about how you went from like so you were writing academic pieces and you're doing all those things and your fiction writing. Did you find that there was a moment where you had to say, okay, I need to really think about what the fiction sounds like, where I'm headed, how to write that so that it doesn't land in that kind of essay style. I think when I first started writing, having written a lot of essays and various things, the mentor I was working with said, well, you don't have to have a thesis statement at the beginning. Yeah, she
very,
was right.
very, very true. Well, I was writing stories, fiction, I guess, stories long before I became an academic, of course. I published my first story and my first poems in college when I was, I don't know, 17, 18, something like that. So I hadn't really learned academic writing. I mean, you write essays in high school, but that's different. So I always had the two apart, and I always did them simultaneously. I became a professor, and basically January 1st, 2000, I left academia. I was a tenured associate professor, so and a lot of people couldn't understand that decision because that's the be all and end all in life, right? Which is not what I
Right.
felt. I felt other people could teach my courses and nobody else could write my stories, right? So I never suffered writing academic writing, which some people do. My colleagues couldn't believe it. I actually enjoy it. And in many ways, it's very simple. I'm from the social sciences, I'm from social work. So, you'd have a section that was reviewing the literature, and then your original work and your thesis, and you'd make your point, and then you show it's proven, and you discuss its relevance. It's so easy, really.
Yeah,
As
there's a bit of a formula there, a little
Yeah,
pattern.
there's a
Yeah.
template, and it's great. You don't have that with fiction. I'm working on a story now. I don't know if it's going to be a novella or a story or what. And I just keep flipping how I'm going to construct it because I haven't gotten there yet. And
Mhm.
for me, that's a lot of the challenge is what is it? How do you create this? How do you build this? You don't have that in academic settings. It's so it's so straightforward to me anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and the information, I don't want to say the information is given to you because obviously you've done the research, but you collected all that research and done all the work, and the
Mm,
information is there. It's just, okay, now I need to make sure I
exactly.
communicate it in this way. But you're
Yeah.
right, with fiction, there are like millions of decisions.
Yeah.
Like there's at every turn you have to decide, and structure is such an important one. I was reading a section from Jack Hodgins' book.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, oh, now I'm forgetting the name of it, which is one of these, one of our gurus. But anyways, all about structure and how important getting that structure right is to ensure that like what you're trying to say with the story will be conveyed partly
mhm,
through the structure. So
mhm,
it is such a
mhm.
fascinating thing. Have you, when you've been writing other pieces in the past, do you also struggle with structure, or is that something that sometimes came really naturally depending on the piece, or um, is that like, do you, oh, I have to ask you, I'm sort of asking 10 things at once now.
Okay.
But
Okay.
like, do you plot your stories out, or do you pants them, or are you kind of one of us
Mhm.
that are sort of in between?
I'm really an organic sort of writer. I remember the first time I recognized that not everyone writes the way I did because I didn't, unlike today. I mean, again, this is about age, my age. There weren't, it's not just I didn't attend, there were not creative writing courses. There were occasional workshops, which there was nothing really. If you were a writer, you wrote and you tried to get published, and that was it. Um, so I'd say after my first book was out, which was 1998, and it was very gratifying because it immediately won a Canadian Jewish Book Award and it got a lot of attention.
Give
Um,
us the title.
a Marrow and Other Stories, like Bone Marrow. And what's amazing is because in 1998, there were not ebooks. There was in theory ebooks. There were in theory, but nobody had ebooks. So nobody has ever been able to access the book except in used bookstores. It's coming out May 1st as an ebook for the first time. I'm so
Amazing.
excited. I love this book. I just love this book. It was my first, so it's sort of, how you feel about a first baby sort of thing. But I remember meeting someone who had plotted a book. She had decided that she was going to set it in this historical period, um, in a very specific place with a feminist spin. Um, who knew quite a lot already then about that time and period, thought that's ridiculous. This long preceded feminism, you had women helping each other, but they were not feminists. You can't just superimpose that historically. But apart from the fact that I had all sorts of major questions about her book, both before I read it and after I read it, um, I was stunned that someone would do that. And of course, please don't misunderstand me. You can create fantastic stories, books, literature in that way. I had just never met anybody who said, I'm going to take apples and cinnamon and brown sugar and see what it's going to turn
What
into.
happened?
I have never done that, never in my life. I don't think well, I was going to say I don't think I could. I'm sure I could. I mean, the same way you have your formula for academic writing and you have templates. But for me, the pleasure is exactly the opposite. It's you're traveling and it goes where it goes and it leads you. And that's the part that I love about it, even though, of course, that's the frightening part of it.
Right,
You're not really in control. You're
right.
in control when you're editing, but when you're really writing, and it takes you often exactly where you don't want to go. It takes you to
That's,
painful places, dark
yes,
places.
yeah,
It takes you where it wants to take you.
that's really true.
And that's why sometimes I'm afraid of writing. Sometimes I just don't want to sit at the desk and do that.
Yeah,
Um, and then there are times when I think that's the most important thing in the world and the best thing in the world.
amazing. Oh, I love that so much because I've heard, I have tried all the things. I have plotted, I've pantsed, I have done a combination. I've tried all the things. And I see what you mean about when you're pantsing, how it just unfolds and your brain just goes. And I often think about it as it's kind of coming to you, like it's coming through you.
Yeah,
Like rather
exactly.
than, when I'm plotting, like I'm I do enjoy that too. Like I enjoy the
Mhm.
puzzle of it. I enjoy the
Yeah,
possibilities. I still think it's very
yeah,
creative. But
yeah,
there's a point at which I feel like, okay, I have my roadmap now. I feel comfortable and sort of safe. But when
yeah,
you're
yeah,
pantsing, like you
yeah,
say, it can go really in different directions. And that's meaning you're vulnerable,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when, there are aspects of writing, obviously, which are cerebral, and that is the satisfaction of plotting. And I very much do that when I'm editing. I mean, I'm standing back and saying, this needs to be further back at the beginning. This doesn't work. That I enjoy that very much. Um, but I don't think the essence of writing is cerebral. I think the essence is from however you want to put it, the heart, the soul, the emotion, the gut. It's from a place in you that is not filtering itself and not editing itself intellectually. It's really allowing yourself that freedom. And that takes, I think, quite a lot of courage. I think it's much easier to do all the plotting and the other stuff, rather than really opening. Who was it who said not Red Skeleton? No, not Red Skeleton. He was the comedian, Red something, a sports writer, and I just forgot his name. But someone asked him, he was an extraordinary writer, sports writer, and someone asked him, is it hard writing for you? And he said, no, you just sit at a desk and open a vein. And I think that is it. And I think unless at a certain point in the process, not necessarily every day of it, thank God, but at a certain point, if you're not opening a vein, you're not getting to your heart. The vein leads to the heart, and that's where the story is. And sometimes I read stories that are acclaimed or by acclaimed writers. I have a literary journal which has now published over 650 stories never before published in English, translated from 22 languages or written in English. And I get the final say. I have a team that works with me. It's called jewishfiction.com. It's international literature. And, I can read something and it's excellently written. And fairly often, sometimes I would say it's by someone very well known. And it leaves me cold. I mean, there's no heart to it. You can see the planning. You put in this, you put in this, you put in this, you put in this. This is a dramatic ending. And I'm sorry, that's not enough. So I have a high standard for other people and I have a high standard for myself. And I can't hear you suddenly.
Oh, can you hear me
Oh,
now?
now I can. Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think sometimes I'm not close enough to the mic.
Oh, it's okay. Anyway.
No, that's so beautiful. It's yeah, I think there's a danger in not allowing yourself the freedom to just explore and just go for it. So you'll write that first draft, you'll get to the end, and then you'll go back and think, okay, now I need to think about structure. Now I know what the story is. Now I know who these people are. And that's when the editing process takes over and you are, reworking this magical thing you've created.
Well, yes, yes, and also, um, it's not a good idea to edit as you go along. And yet, for example, what I'm doing now involves what are now very clear sections. And I've had to just stop re-editing the first section because I'll never get beyond it, and it's not what I want. I can't get it where I want it, and so I'm going to focus on the other pieces. Um, but it's funny about editing because I forget who it was with. It was some writer event. And the writer was bragging about how much work she had put into it. And it had taken, a year. And there had been, there were 6 versions. And I restrained myself from laughing. First of all, my novels took 7 years apiece. My novella, which we'll talk about also. By the way, here's the cover. My son
Oh,
made the
so
cover,
nice.
so
Oh,
I'm
that's
so proud of it.
lovely.
I love the cover.
Oh,
Um, that took me 2 years, even though it's under 100 pages. So I'm a slow writer. And I couldn't even count the number of versions. I just thought
yeah.
6 was so cute. I thought, oh my God, 6 versions in 1 year? Wow. I was happy for her in a way. I hope her
Right.
book is good. I haven't read it, but yeah, that's not what I do. No.
Yeah. And I think there's um I find it difficult when people talk about drafts because even what is a full draft
No,
and
that's right.
is every pass a draft or is it every like I don't even know what they all are. So I mean I just want people to give me those numbers. I'm like, I don't know what that means because
Yeah.
I'm also the same.
Yeah.
Like I stop I don't count because
Mhm.
I'll often have several projects going at a time. Like I usually have one that's getting close, one that I'm working on, and one that I'm researching. So I'm hopping back and forth between 2 or 3 projects. I don't know how many times. I
It
have to keep
doesn't
going until
matter.
it's done.
It doesn't matter. I mean, you go till you get it right,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
all. I
Until
just
it's
find
yours.
that counting really funny. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think some people may have a like I know there's folks who have they need to reach a word count or an amount of time they spend a day. Like some people really feel comfort in those
Mm-hmm.
numbers. That doesn't
Yes,
work for me. Like I don't
me
keep count
neither.
of my word count every day. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Me neither.
So I guess just different ways of processing it. I don't
Yeah.
know, or like
Yeah.
being motivated, or I'm not sure what that is, but
Well, you know what? We're people. We're not just writers with our hands or our computers. And we all have our own way of managing stress and challenges and work. These are very complex and very individual things. I think if you look at how, you cook a meal and I cook a meal, it's these are so many things come into play. So even though I'm talking and you're talking about how we do things, I certainly am not being prescriptive, and however, whatever gets you there, and that's great. But yeah, it always surprises me to hear other writers talking about how they got there and what their process was, because it's usually so different from mine, and that's as it should be.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
as it should be. And I think it does take some time and experimentation with what works for individuals. And I
Yeah.
do think it's genre specific too. Genre fiction is a really different beast than literary fiction. And having done both now, I feel like, oh, my process is just different. It just is. And so I have to kind of go, okay, that's fine, and I'm doing that. And but it's like I'm the same person, but it's a different form. And I don't know, maybe poets would like as like poetry. Is it the same for you when you're writing poetry versus fiction? Is there a
Yeah.
different process there as well?
I haven't written poetry in years, although I do sort of jot things down, but I only published poetry back in college, actually, and I've been thinking about that, but I'm not,
Just saying.
yeah. Yeah, why not? Why not?
Why not? Why not full
Yeah,
circle back to
yeah.
poetry?
What
Go
what
in
what
there.
genre were you writing when it wasn't fiction?
Yeah. So
Who are you?
I've written creative nonfiction and I've
Yes,
written historical fiction.
right. Yeah.
And so I have two published and two kind of in the process. And then now I'm working on cozy mysteries, which are short and fun and
Yeah.
delightful. But definitely I have to, for me, I have to map that out before I start.
Yeah.
I need to know where we're headed. A
Yeah.
lot of people who write cozies don't need to do that.
Yeah.
They just figure out what happened later. But I'm like, no. But also I'm new at it. So that might change over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for now, I like to have that real solid plot. Whereas historical fiction, involves so much research,
Yeah. Yeah.
years of research, and often travel and all of those things. So I feel like I have to sink into those for years,
For
and
sure.
the process is just so much different.
Yeah.
But I love it. But I also the writing these cozies is really a nice little break from all the things. As
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot happening in the world. So just they're just really fun. And I think I needed that. for a
Mm,
little bit of a break. And then the historical fiction isn't going anywhere. I have them.
yeah.
I have one I need to finish researching, and the other one is needs some editing still. But
Mhm.
um, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, like I'm not rushing that process because it
You
is,
can't rush it. You can't rush it. You
yeah,
can't rush that process. No.
yeah, 100%. So I want to talk about your novella Doubles. Did you set out to write a novella? Did you know what you were going to write, or were you like this? Let's see where this heads, and it might be a novel, it might be a novella. How did
Yeah,
that?
I didn't really know. I didn't think it would be a story. It's it's about a 12-year-old girl set in 1968. Although, do I consider it historical fiction? Not really, because the historical context doesn't play a major role. I mean, it does in an overarching way, but there's not much historical detail there. And it's not YA, even though the main character is 12 years old. People are trying to make it YA, which I find interesting, and I have no objection. I have respect for YA literature, but it's not intended for a 12-year-old reader. I'm sure a 12 or 13, 14-year-old reader could read it because the language is pretty straightforward. It's about a girl who is mistakenly placed in an institution for disturbed children, but she's not disturbed. Um, so it's how she copes over a 6-month period. She happens to be brilliant at math, and she sees the whole world through numbers and mathematics. And it's really her understanding of what's happening to her viewed in that way, and her way of finding strength and meaning in what is really a kind of insane situation. Um, in some ways, I think of it as, although I didn't think about it this way when I was writing it, but now looking at it, I think that in many ways it's a book about language because math is her language. It's the only language she trusts. She figures she can't trust people, she can't trust the world, but numbers never lie. This is her. Now, actually, numbers do lie, but I'm not going to tell her that. It's certainly, she at one point gives the example that 1 + 1 is 2, and that's only correct if you're in base 10 in mathematics. If you're in a different base, it's not true. But anyway, never mind higher math. Um, she's a wonderful character whom I really love. I mean, you don't always love your characters, as you know. Um, she's very endearing, and it's an epistolary book. It's entirely written in diary entries. They're not diary written to herself. They're written to a friendly trustee who asked all the children questions that they had to answer. Um, so these are her entries, which reveal her life and her innermost self. Um, so I knew it wasn't going to be a short story. And I didn't know if it would be a novel. And only about a month ago, thinking about this book and knowing that I was going to be asked about it, because I hadn't thought about it until I knew I was going to be asked about it, I remembered reading when I was about 12 years old a book called Daddy Longlegs, which was a famous book at the time for young people. It was definitely YA before there was even, a YA classification. And it was written in letters by a girl in an orphanage. Now, my book is nothing like hers, um, but it's interesting. It's so different from mine. I just reread it, and it just nothing in common, really, other than that obvious parallel. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting to see in Doubles, into the girl's mind, and how she deals with emotions through numbers, how she manages emotion through math. Um, anyway, I love it, and basically, consistent with what I said earlier about sort of working organically, it was finished, and I looked at the number of pages, and I went, "Oh, that's a novella." So, as it happens, my previous book, this is my sixth, but my most recent book before this was comprised of two novellas. So I seem to be on a novellas roll. And I actually think very highly of novellas as a form. I think it's a very underrated and underappreciated form. And I would be happy to spend the rest of my life writing novellas, actually. I think they're so powerful. I think that they contain the breadth and power of a novel with the intimacy and conciseness of a short story. I think it's a fabulous genre. So I'm really proud of it. I don't know how it's gotten great advanced reviews, but we'll see how the world responds to it when it's out on May 1st.
So fascinating. I think I was talking to Janella Botha. I don't know if I'm saying her last name, right, who
Yeah,
writes short stories. And we were
yeah,
talking how powerful short stories are for that,
yeah,
concise language and,
definitely.
everything needs to just be chosen. But I can see that about novellas too, right? Because you need to
Yeah.
tell that complete story, but it's tighter and I'm a really big fan of novellas as well. And I feel like it's having a day. Like I think they're coming back, right?
Hmm.
We're seeing more of them. And I know my publisher even said that sort of in that publishing sphere there that a lot of them are talking about that, but because I think I'm just speculating here, but the readership is maybe not always leaning towards that like 800-page tome anymore. Like we don't have
No,
attention span,
no,
but we
no. It's
can ingest like this beautiful novel, a novella length piece, and
absolutely.
and some people read a book a day, like so.
No,
I'm
you're touching on something very important, Lisa. Actually, I read a book, not a new book, but a marvelous book called Reader, Come Home.
okay.
Um, Her name escaped me, but it's obviously that's the only book with a title like that. A marvelous book written by someone who works professionally with children with reading difficulties. And she shares basically the neurological background to why we are all having trouble reading long works now. Directly the effect of online reading. And this was even written maybe 5 years ago, so I'm sure the situation is much worse now. And many of us feel like, gee, what's with me? I used to read for 3 hours straight, and now I'm constantly checking my phone or doing this. And she's very straight. She says there's nothing wrong with us. It's a neurological change that is not your fault. There are ways to try to overcome it. She put herself on a program. But to be frank about this, I always have a stack of books from the library. God bless Toronto Public Library, 100 branches. You can get almost any book in the world from there. And I got this book that was highly recommended and won all sorts of awards, and it's 500 pages. I read the first 50 and it was very good, but I obviously understood that it's chronological and I had 500 and 450 pages. Actually, it was longer than 500. I think it was closer to 600. Anyway, I remember, and I'm a slow reader, as I'm a slow writer. I really take it in and I digest and I think and I question. And I remember calculating how much of my time this was going to take. This book was going to take me 2 or 3 weeks to read. I mean, I don't have 8 hours a day to read, right? At my rate. And I just looked at it and I felt really tired. And I thought, I don't think I want to take this on right now. I'll come back to it, I hope, at some point. I gave it back to the library. Now, again, I'm not insulting novels. And this was just this week, and maybe I'm tired this week. I am tired this week. But there is something about a book like Doubles that you can basically read in an afternoon. It's a different read than a short story. It's a different thing. It has a different kind of breadth. I wouldn't say depth because you can have obviously all sorts of depth with a short story, and I love short stories too. And my first book was short stories. Um, there's something about the breadth and depth of a novella that is so satisfying. And again, you can sit and read my book in 3 or 4 hours. I think it's a really different experience than reading 15 pages every day for a month, It's a different thing.
Yeah,
So,
100%. And I feel like for those of us who have been readers our whole lives,
yeah.
I mean, we know, right? We know, okay, I'm ready for this piece, or oh no, I need to have a little break and I need something lighter. And
Yeah.
like I will I will read nonfiction, fiction, a poetry book. Like I'll just
Yeah,
cycle through things too.
yeah, yeah.
But I think people who don't read as regularly or haven't been readers, um, I think I could see where they would really struggle right now with
Oh
anything
yeah.
super lengthy. And if you
Oh
think
yeah.
about even the shows we watch coming out, I mean, they used to be 24 episodes or something, and now it's like you get six or
That's
you get
right.
eight.
No, absolutely. And I came across an article today when I was looking for something else, a scientific article, and I just read the abstract. I think in as of 2024, the average reading length that people would do before removing their eyes from the page was 2.5 minutes, and now it's 40 seconds. So I think I mean, this is part of a much longer conversation, which we're not going to have right now, but about, I'm not going to doom and gloom about reading and the future of literature and all that sort of thing. But really, I don't think people re understand fully how hard it is for many people to read, to pick up a book and read it. And I don't know how you get around that. Certainly, there were always, even before online reading, large swaths of our population that didn't read, and that's fine too. But I'm talking about people who like to read and or liked to read and now struggle to read. I think it's something that requires some very serious attention
Yeah,
and
100%. I totally agree. And having taught, like I say, high school English,
yeah,
and we really implemented a program by Penny Kittle actually in the States. And instead of, teaching the same core text to each grade, we allowed kids to pick their books, but they had to read more. And what we saw a rise in the reading rate amongst students because no longer like if I tell you you have to read Catcher in the Rye,
yeah,
some of the class will and some of the class won't, and some of the class will get the Coles notes,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's
yeah,
always going to
yeah.
be that. But if you say you can read anything you choose, now you have more engagement because they're reading their thriller or their whatever.
Mhm, mhm.
So we saw that, but I'm really concerned because it was a struggle to get kids to get engaged with books. So, and now that I mean, with AI and the screens and all the things, it's just getting more difficult. So, it does scare me a little bit. I don't think reading goes away. I don't think writing goes away, but I think our habits are shifting, and maybe we need to pause and say, well, what do we really want
Mhm.
these
I
busy lives of ours to look like, and what
Yeah.
are we doing?
No, absolutely. And I think what you say is very important about uh, high school English, which is a very important thing. I mean, for some people, that's their only introduction to literature, and they'll remember those books the rest of their lives. I think giving people choice in the books they read, as in anything in life, increases motivation and ownership and efficacy and all sorts of things. Um, for me, a question remains, not about your high school students, but about people in general. Um, some people say, well, it doesn't matter what they read. Their eyes are moving over the page or the screen. And if they're reading a blog, it's still reading. And if they're writing a blog, it's still writing. And it's not I sometimes think, I remember when I was doing academic writing for my work job, I would think there needs to be a different word for writing because this isn't my writing. This is, it's not the same reading. I mean, the experience of reading, and of course, I'm a fiction person, but it goes for many other genres. Reading a novel or a story or a novella, and letting go of yourself in a certain sense and entering another world and activating your imagination is not the same as reading a 10-sentence blog. It just isn't. It's not reading. It's not the same verb. It shouldn't be the same
We need
verb.
different language for this, really.
Yeah, I think it's really problematic when people say, well, the main thing is their eyes are moving through words. No, that's not the same thing.
Oh, no,
Um, no, but anyway, it's the
no,
world we live in.
it is the world we live in, but I think it's something we need to pay attention to because I feel like that like the gift of reading is so important to our creativity and our imagination, our ability to problem solve, our ability to critical thinking, even
Absolutely.
so many aspects that we need. And I worked I worked in a school that was a science and tech school, so I always felt
Ooh.
the like little duck out of water, right? Because kids would
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like
yeah.
heavy duty science program and they'd come to me and I'd be like, let's do some creative writing.
Yeah.
Let's do poetry.
Yeah.
And but I would try to say, like, if you're going to work in these tech fields or you're going to work in medicine, you have to be able to think with your imagination, creativity, and think outside
Of
the box. Like
course.
you have to be able to do those
Exactly.
things. And yes, math is important, but then you have to be able to it's like how can we use those figures and then like just seeing things differently, right? So
Yeah.
I always try to make that argument, but I'm not sure that I convinced
We
all of them.
never
But I did
know.
have some writers, and a lot of kids love to write, and they wanted that space. And you can see that as at very young ages, they love to read, they love to write. So I have hope because it's ingrained in folks
Yeah,
from
it
very
is.
young
It
age.
is. It's in our DNA to
Mhm.
listen to stories and tell stories. And actually, I love what you say about how it fosters critical thinking and imagination. And another thing, actually specific to fiction, to literary fiction, the research shows that it increases empathy in real life and real behavior. And to me, that's really important. It's understanding that someone who's different from you, you know, someone other is still human and is still someone you can connect with and understand and share things with. And the world being what it is right now, I think that's probably one of the most important messages a young person can get.
Absolutely agree with you. Empathy and with the amount of stress and anxiety, yeah, everyone is carrying, but students in particular who have less life experience to be able to deal with it, reading can and writing can help alleviate some of that, right? And
No, absolutely.
bring that
Absolutely.
pressure down. So there's so many benefits. Well, I mean, I think we're both so parents out there, please read to your little ones.
Yeah, we're
Buy
preaching
books,
to
go to the library.
we're preaching to the converted here.
That's right. Yeah, somebody out there is like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I need to get read to my child.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do love your 12-year-old protagonist, especially in this story, who's so fascinated by mathematics and who's just sees the world in that through that lens, because it's not a lens that I'm familiar with, but I also think that each of us has sort of a gift and a way of seeing the world. I'm curious, and don't give us any spoilers, but I'm curious about the reason she was put into this facility in the first place.
Mhm, mhm.
And what is that something that we learn later, or is it something we get early on?
Yeah, you get early on and it doesn't ruin the novella. Um, my background, as I said, is in social work, which included in some cases child welfare. So this is really based on child welfare practices. And I have to say, I hugely admire people working in that field. It's a difficult, very, very difficult field. The decisions you have to make are sometimes agonizing. And most people working in this field really care enormously about the well-being of the kids they work with. But inevitably, there are mistakes and there are people who aren't so capable. And in this situation, her mother has died 10 months before, and her father changed radically. He now drinks, has a furious temper, and it's a family where this girl, who is unnamed, has an older sister and a younger brother. And she seems to be the one whom her father never really liked much. And at one point, he loses his temper and hits her. And the neighbor sees and calls the police, and the welfare system kicks in and decides for her own well-being, for her own good, she needs to be removed from the home. Um, I've personally seen many situations. This is 1968 and things have changed, but some of the questions remain the same, some of the issues remain the same. She's someone who should never have been put in an institution like this. And actually, one of the staff in this place called Valley View, actually says to her soon after she gets here, this isn't the right place for you. But in this catchment area, um, it's an unnamed Canadian location, but in this province, there isn't anything else available right now for a 12-year-old girl. That also is the reality of child welfare and social work services. That's very common. So in the meantime, she's here. But of course, the in the meantime becomes, 6 months, and it's probably going to remain that way. And she's surrounded by very, very troubled children and not very capable staff in many cases. So it's not a story about physical abuse or sexual abuse, although it relates tangentially, or more than just tangentially, I'd say indirectly, to our concern these days about what happened to Indigenous children in residential schools in exactly this period. Now, I'm not saying it's the same thing at all. It's not the same thing. But institutions back then were what institutions were back then, and there was very little insight or awareness the way we do now about uses and misuses of power. And she, fortunately, is not physically or sexually abused, but she's neglected, obviously, and has lost her whole world, her family, her friends. It's far from home, no one visits. So it's, how does one survive, really? How does one survive loss, and how does one survive trauma? And I think that's a question that's relevant to all ages and all times. And as you and I alluded to very briefly before, I mean, I think this is a terrible time in our world, actually. I don't think this is a normal, whatever normal is, this is not a normal time. And I think there's just so much loss and trauma for so many people in so many countries right now, that the book is very relevant. Unfortunately, I'd like to
No,
say.
I know what you mean. Yeah, and I think it's important to read works that help us to reflect on what's happening, because I mean, I've had folks tell me like about my father's story when he was in a concentration camp in Poland. Oh, well, I can't read books like that. um, well, it's
Wow.
this is an
Well, you have to
experience
read a
people
book like that.
had, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, reading
Wow.
it is like the least of your troubles. Like, there's so many other.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
mean, and I kind of understand that they're, for whatever reason, emotionally it's difficult, and perhaps they have other things in their life, or I mean, there could be lots of reasons, but just on the surface of it, it feels kind of like dismissive
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's really important to engage with stories that make us think, make us reflect on what's happening in our world, make us think about the past and decisions that have been made, whether it's by governments or institutions or whatever, what maybe individuals even, um, and not to shy away from those things. I think it's really important for us, and like you say, that empathy piece,
Yeah.
right? That understanding piece, that pausing and going, like, what would I do? What would it,
Mhm.
what if that happened to me? What if that happened to my family? What if, and how would I have handled? And maybe we all come up with different answers to that. And we don't really know what it would have been like for us, but
Mhm.
it opens the door to better
Yeah.
understanding, at least.
Absolutely. I mean, I do understand people wanting to protect themselves from pain. And it's very interesting you mentioned this experience, because I know people who are just, I don't do Holocaust, and I don't do concentration camps, and I don't do refuge, I don't do camps, whatever. Well, you're cutting out human experience. And especially when you're talking about a situation where it has a quote happy ending. I mean, not to trivialize, but the person survived. How
Yes,
did they
I always
survive?
tell people that too.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be here.
yeah, there's so much to learn, and yeah, it's really interesting people's self-protectiveness, which may be yet another reason that some people don't like to read. But part of it is also how people portray what it's about, like I really, and I guess I should know this because you're this only the second time I'm talking about the book so far, um, that it is a book about survival ultimately.
Yes.
It's not a book about agony and anguish. And I recently saw a movie, a film about Alcee Perry, the basketball player. A fascinating story, actually, about this a black man from New Jersey who ends up becoming the star player in Israel, and they win the European Championship. It's just astonishing story. But it was described, and after all that, he descends into drugs and prison for years, and then it has a happy ending at the end. But it's described as Alcee Perry's at post-triumph, his descent into blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm not watching that. This is a film about living in prison as a drug addict. Like, why would I want to watch that? And yet I said, I do want, I mean, I want to see this. I'm curious. And it was the most uplifting film I've ever seen. So it's also about the blurbs and the way people define their work. And it's really important not to sugarcoat things, but also how we put a spin on them. You know, you can spin something in a terrifyingly dark way, and you
That's
can spin it as there was struggle in this book, but there's joy and there's humor. And this happens to be a book
humanity.
about a girl with a fantastic sense of humor. And a
Yes,
lot of it is very funny, which is
yes, yeah.
something, I have to remember to tell people when I tell
Yes, exactly.
them.
Yeah, it is easy to, and especially if you think of um, marketing individuals and who are, we often write our own blurbs, but like for
Yeah,
those
yeah,
publishers who have somebody to do that work, um, I've read blurbs that have nothing to do with the story, and I'm
no,
thinking,
I
I
know.
thought this was going to be this book, and it's completely different. And so they're trying to reach a market that they probably know the book isn't for, because the people who want to read that book are probably going to find it anyway. But I think that's disingenuous. Like, just tell us like what it's really about, because it will find its readers.
Yeah.
But when
No,
you're kind of hoodwinked, you think, huh, okay, well, the one book I have in mind in particular, I enjoyed it, but was not what it was labeled to be. And
wow.
just tell us what it really was, because I
Yeah,
get that they have to part, like you were saying earlier, your book is has a young adult character, but not a YA, like it doesn't really fit into the YA category for
right.
marketing.
Mm.
Um, and that makes sense, but it's also like, I think sometimes the publishing houses want to, well, how can we also, and also,
Yeah,
and
no,
also like trying to
exactly.
get the widest readership.
Well, YA is hot. Actually,
Yes,
apparently that's where most of the money is made. Someone told me about a month ago, she is the co-produce co she's the one of two people running a publishing house, whatever her official title is. And she said, "Oh, it's our YA books that allow us to publish the poetry and everything else."
I
So
see. Yeah.
it's hot. So I could see people. I love Guernica, which has published this book and my previous book, and they don't do this. But I could see publishing houses, pitching this as YA. And I mean, it's not, as I said before, it's not exclusive to adults. And I read Crime and Punishment at 15. So, there are lots of kids who could read doubles, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, you're right. There's a disingenuousness about
Yeah.
some of this parts of the industry. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really about that part that we don't care for, the marketing and promotion part. But can we just write our books, please?
Yeah.
Readers, can
Yeah.
you just find it?
Yeah. I
But I
wish.
guess there's a
We
how
all
do they
wish.
find it? So
Yeah,
I mean,
we wish.
there's
Yeah.
yeah. So I just think this is a great story that I'm really intrigued by, and I think it will have us thinking. And she sounds both delightful, but also troubled, right? Like to be put in that position, I think is extremely difficult. And having lost family member, and
Yeah.
it's difficult. But I think that's where we learn to figure out how we approach these difficulties in our lives too. Like, how do we
Mhm.
respond to
Yeah.
them, and how do we find the light in
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
this?
No,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, this institution supposedly for troubled children, she's not troubled in being psychologically disturbed, however, whatever these terms mean. But she's unhappy. She doesn't want to be where she is, that's for sure. And you're right. I think there's a lot to learn from this girl. Um, she has a lot of depth. And she builds her days, since there's no formal schooling at all, around a math book that she found in the library there. And next to the math book is a philosophy book. And there are a lot of big words in there, and she can't really relate to it, but she read the back cover and it gives her questions. Why? Why? And 12-year-olds and younger than 12, 5-year-olds. I have a 4-year-old grandson who's asking why all the time. We all ask why all the time. We don't get answers most of the time, but we ask it all the time. And she's an asker and she's a thinker. And she's a wonderful character. I mean, someone who read it wrote that they just enjoyed being in her presence for the duration of the book, because she's so alive and thinking and funny and looking for a way through everything. And I think that's what most of us are like in our lives, trying to find a way through.
So great. Well, thank you. I think I'm inspired by her, and I'm also inspired by you. And I
Oh,
adore this conversation.
me
We could
too,
talk
Lisa.
for hours and hours, I
I
feel.
know. I love talking to you, Lisa. This was fantastic. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And when
Thank
this podcast comes out, your book will just be around the corner in May. So folks should get their copy, and I'm sure they will, because it sounds like so beautiful and delightful. And also will have us pause and think. And that's what we need to do. Everyone go read. All these folks in Northern Ontario who can't get out on the road, just grab a book. Turn off the phone.
Exactly.
Turn off the Netflix.
Exactly.
Nora and I say go read.
Go read. Go read.
Right.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Nora.
Lisa. Thank you so much. Thank
I believe writers need sisu, strength, courage, and determination to get their projects done, and I can help you access your sisu. Are you working on a novel or memoir? You don't have to do it alone. Join us in the Women Writing Circle. We meet bi-weekly for 90 minutes to get pages done. Or consider applying for an upcoming group book coaching program to develop the foundational elements of your story in a supportive community. These 8-week-long programs include weekly coaching calls, goal setting, craft discussion, and personalized feedback on writing tasks. If you'd prefer to work one-on-one, contact me about one of my coaching packages at lisakovalabookcoach.com. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to have a coffee break with us at Women Writing. Don't forget to subscribe to Women Writing on Substack. If you like this episode, share it with someone who needs a writing break and a little inspiration. Happy writing! Thank you to Michael Jensen for his original music and editing, and to Mia Jensen for the logo design.